All right, this is section 5.1 homework part 2. So we're going to go through problems, I think it's 16, maybe 16 through 28. All right, so starting with problem 16, write the rate as a unit rate. Now, if you'll remember, unit rate means the denominator of your ratio or your fraction is equal to 1. So we have a hummingbird moves its wings at a rate of 4,860 wing beats a minute. Write this rate in a wing beats per second. All right, so let's see what we can do this. The hummingbird moves its wings at, again, let's write down exactly what we have. We have 4,000. Why is my pen not working? Hold on just a minute. 4,860 wing beats. So wing beats a minute. That's like saying per minute. Okay. Now, remember, it's a unit rate, so if you would like to put that 1 in the denominator, you most certainly can. That kind of helps me feel a little bit better about my ratio of what's happening. But whenever you see, I know I saw it. There it is. Right, it is a unit rate. Okay, now they're asking us to change this to wing beats per second. All right, so basically these minutes right here have to change to seconds. Now, to me, the easiest way to do that is rewrite what you have. You have 4,860 over 1. We're not changing wing beats, so wing beats is still wing beats. But I'm going to substitute, remember, that's 1 minute, not because of this one. That could be whatever it needs to be, but right here, that's 1 minute. So 1 minute, I'm trying to change to seconds. So I'm going to replace the 1 minute with 60 seconds. Again, because we know 1 minute, so 1 minute is equal to 60 seconds. So I'm really just doing a substitution for that word right there, 1 minute, and I'm substituting an equivalent 60 seconds. And if you think about what we have here, we have a fraction that we could reduce. Remember, this is like multiplication. We have 4,860 over 1 times wing beats over 60 seconds. So I can reduce this fraction, cross-canceling, right? Now, I know that 10 divides into both of those, and I guess it's even possible that 60 divides both of those. So in my calculator, I'm just going to see if I can divide both of these by 60. Now, if I get a decimal when I divide that one by 60, then I'm going to try something smaller. I know 10 goes into both, but let's go ahead and go for the gold here. So 4,860 divided by 60, it does. It gives me 81. So that gets crossed out and changed to 81, and then 60 divided by 60 is 1. So what does that give us a result of? That's 81 over 1. Wing beats is still on the top, but now that's per second. Okay, and then remember, when you have 81 over 1, you can just write that as 81 wing beats per second. I'm just abbreviating that. And they have it here for us already. So 81 is what we type in the box. Okay, problem 17. It says, determine whether the following proportion is a true proportion. Now, we talked about this on problem number 1 and maybe number 2, or maybe just number 2. But anyway, a true proportion, we know it's a proportion because it's a fraction equal to a fraction, or a ratio, 6/4, equal to another ratio, 8/7. But no, if it's actually true, one way you can handle this, and this is not the only way, but by far the easiest way, is to do the cross product. Okay, you'll often hear that called cross multiply. So 6 times 7, is that really equal to, we cross this way, 4 times 8, and what do you think? 6 times 7 is 42, 4 times 8 is 32. Those are not equal, so this is not a true proportion. Now look at our choices. The yes and the yes are out. But let's check this out. No, because 6 plus 7 is not equal to 4 plus 8. Well, no, it's not a cross sum or a cross add. It's a cross product or a cross multiply, and it's this one right here. 6 times 7 is not equal to 4 times 8. Next problem. We've got write the sentence as a proportion, then determine whether the proportion is a true proportion. So remember, when you're writing a proportion, you have a ratio equal to another ratio. So let's write the ratio on the left. It says 1 8/10 is to 6. So that is your first ratio. 1 8/10, so that's 1 8/10 is to 6 as, now we're doing our second ratio, 2 4/10, so 2 4/10 is to 8. So that's a lot to take in word form like that. So this is 1 8/10 is to 6. So you notice it is a ratio with the 2 in the middle, so that's a ratio. As, that's our equals, 2 4/10 is to 8. Now we're supposed to cross multiply or find the cross product. So I'm going to write that down. 1 8/10 times 8, is that really equal to 6 times 2 4/10? Now remember, when you multiply fractions together, using mixed numbers is by far not the easiest way to do it. Changing it to an improper fraction is better. And we'll tell you the truth, working with reduced numbers is better as well. So, or a simplified fraction. So before I change this to an improper fraction, by doing 1 times 10 plus 8 over 10, I'm going to reduce this fraction or simplify this fraction to lowest terms. That's 1 4/5, right? Dividing both of those by 2 times 8. Is that really equal? Same thing's happening on this right side. 4/10 divides by 2, 4 and the 10. So that can reduce or simplify to 2/5. Now I'm going to change them to improper fractions. So 1 times 5 is 5 plus 4, that's 9/5 times 8. And you could put that over 1 if you like. Remember, when you multiply fractions, you do numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. Is that equal to 6? Same thing here. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 2 more is 12, and you keep that over 5. Now when I multiply on the left, I do 9 times 8 is 72 over 5. Is that really equal to 6 times 12? That is also 72 over 5, so yes, this is a true proportion. It says type an equation. Okay, first they're asking for the proportion, use whole numbers or decimals, and then is it a true proportion? So type an equation, use whole numbers or decimals for any numbers in the equation, do not simplify. So this is the first entry, and I'd imagine once you simplify this, it's going to ask you, is this a true proportion? So my apologies for not going through the entire question and seeing all the questions, because I just screenshot these to put them in the PowerPoint, but I'm pretty certain that's how that's going to go down. All right, so how about problems 19 and 20? All right, for the given proportion, find the unknown number n. So I'm going to rewrite it just a little bit larger. 9/7. So that's our ratio, but then when you make it equal to another ratio, this is what turns it into a proportion. And we've already worked with cross product, right? So n times 14 looks a little better when you put the number in front. That's called a coefficient. 14 times n is equal to, cross this way, 7 times 10 is 70. Now, to get this n by itself, what I'm going to do is divide both sides by 14. Now, honestly, y'all, this is a skill that you learn later in an algebra class. So I'm going to talk to you about a different way to handle it too, but to me, this is still the easiest way to handle it. Okay, 70 divided by 14. I could do that on my basic calculator. 70 divided by 14. And it is 5. So n is equal to 5. Okay, that's one way to handle it. Another way to handle it is this. Okay, when I look at the top, I can't do this yet. Okay, but on the bottom, notice that I multiplied this number times 2 to turn it into a 14. So what number do I multiply by 2 to turn it into a 10? And that would be n is equal to 5. Now again, that makes you almost think a little bit harder compared to the cross product method. So you do what you feel is best, but I really like the cross product method, even though that algebra step we haven't officially learned in this class. We will in a later section, but I want to talk about it both ways. So on this next problem, again, n over 25 is equal to 4 over 100. So let's think about it the second way. What do we multiply 25 by to turn it into a 100? That's 4. Okay, so this top one must also be multiplied by 4. So what times 4 equals 4? Well, that's going to give me n is equal to 1. So that's more of the thinking way to do it. If we do the cross product way, that's n times 100. I'm going to write it as 100n is equal to 25 times 4. That's 100. Remember, the next step is I divided both sides by the number in front of the n, and then n is 100 divided by 100, which is 1. Doesn't matter to me which way you do it. The cross product method in the end is probably the way you're going to do those after we learn that algebra skill, but right now it doesn't matter to me. Okay, so another one of these where it gets a little bit more complicated, and that's the problem. The more complicated it gets, the easier that cross product method is. Okay, so if I do, I'm going to rewrite the problem. N over 0.5 is equal to 0.01, which is really 1/100th, and this is 5/10 over 10. Okay, now I'm going to do that cross product. So you have 10n, or 10 times n, and I cross this way. That's 0.5 times 0.01, or 5/10 times 1 over 100. Definitely going to use my basic calculator. So 0.5 times 0.01, and that gives me 0.005. Now remember what the next step was? We divided. Always the last step is divide by this number that's times your variable. So the reason we do that is to get the n by itself. And then in my calculator, my basic calculator, I'm just going to divide. So 0.005 divided by 10. And I have 0.0005. And trying to do that the other way, by just manipulating the fractions, I don't even want to do that, because it's really far more challenging than we need it to be. This cross product way is so much easier to do. All right, now this looks like a mess. It's really even hard to tell what the original fraction is, but notice how where the equals is, that's your original fraction line right there. So when I do the cross product, I'm going to do n times 19 and 4/5, and I'm going to write it this way. So 19 and 4/5 times n. Now I'm going to do the other side too. So that's 15/11 times 8 and 1/15. Okay. Remember, we've talked about these mixed numbers, and you don't want to multiply with mixed numbers. It's just far more challenging than it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my basic calculator to change this to an improper fraction. So 19 times 5. I'm going to do that first. 19 times 5 is equal to 95, but don't forget to add the 4. Plus 4 gives you 99, and you keep the original denominator over 5, n. Okay, on the other side, I have 15 over 11, and then I have 8 times 15, which gives you 120, plus that 1 in the numerator. So remember, 8 times 15, and then you add the 1. So that's 121 over the original denominator of 15. Remember, order of operations right here. Hey, we've got some good stuff happening too. Look, let's simplify this first. And then remember, the last step, we're going to divide by 99/5, but not yet. Let's simplify this side. Okay, so what I do, notice you can cross cancel, which is different than a cross product. So this 15 and this 15 cancel. Why? Because they both divide by 15 and you get 1. But not only that, 121 and 11, they both divide by 11. So divide by 11, divide by 11, and that gives me, so that turned into a 1, and that turned into a 1, and that turned into a 1, and 121 divided by 11 is just 11. That's simplified to just plain old 11. Now I have 99/5 times n. Now remember the last step is I'm going to divide this side by 99/5, and I'm going to divide this side. Now look, I can write it this way if I want to, divided by 99/5, right? Why did I do it this way? So you can tell easily that I'm going to flip. Remember, you're supposed to flip. When you divide by a fraction, you're supposed to flip the divisor. So this is 11 times 5 over 99. Remember, that's 11 over 1. And over here, I'm making a mess of my page here, but there's still an n on this side. Now look, 11 and 99, they both divide by 11. So if I just do this in my head, 11 divided by 11 is 1, and 99 divided by 11 is 9. Now can you see what we have left? When we do, no, I'm not trying to do that in purple. When we do 1 times 5, that gives me 5. And then 1 times 9 is 9. So n is equal to 5/9. I might have needed a little bit more space for that problem. I apologize. All right, problem 23, we're getting there. So a basketball player averages 41 baskets for every 100 attempts. That sounds like a ratio, doesn't it? 41 baskets on top, 100 attempts on the bottom. Then it says if he attempted 900 baskets, how many baskets did he make? Okay, let's see if we can set this up. So, better yet, let me read the directions. It says, understand the problem. Reread it as many times as needed. What is the question asking for? So how many baskets, I mean, that's really what it's asking for. How many baskets did he make? So if I set up the ratio to just talk about this, we have 41 baskets. Okay, for every 100 attempts. Okay, that's a ratio. Now, that would be equal to another ratio where you have baskets on top and attempts on the bottom. Okay? So it says if he attempted 900 baskets. Now, which is that? Is that baskets or attempts? Well, it's attempted. He attempted 900 baskets, so it's 900 attempts. But how many baskets did he make? So if we were actually going to solve this problem, and it may go on to ask you that. I don't know. Once again, I just screenshotted the problem, but didn't work my way through it first to see if they ask you more questions. So we're going to look at it all the way around. So first of all, it's asking me, is it the number of baskets made out of 900 attempts? That's what it looks like, right? The number of baskets made out of 900 attempts. Let's read the others. The number of attempts if 41 baskets were made. Well, no, that was 100 attempts. No, it's not asking for that, right? The number of baskets made out of 100 attempts. No, it's 41. We already know there's 41 baskets out of 100 attempts. So this is definitely our winner right here. Now, it might not ask you anything after that, but if it did, here's what you would have to do. You would have to do the cross product. So 41 times 900 on this side, and on this side, you've got 100 times the number of baskets, so it's question mark. Let's call it n, like we were doing in the other problems. Okay? Then use your basic calculator to say, okay, well, 41 times 900, that gives me 36,900. And on this side, we have 100n. Is it a problem that our n is on the other side? Not at all. Remember, the last step is you always divide by the number in front of the n. That's called a coefficient. And the reason we're dividing is we're doing the opposite of what's happening here. So I need to divide this side by 100, and I need to divide this side by 100. So over here, I have my n value. I'm going to keep it on the right. That's okay. Now here, I can do this in my head, or I could type it in my basic calculator. But remember, if you have 2 zeros here, that cancels with those 2 zeros there. So 369 baskets would be our answer if they do go through and ask that after you select the first part of the question. All right, so number 24, we're going through 28, so we're getting there. A hybrid car averages 603 miles on a 12.8 gallon tank of gas. Now notice that is a ratio. So you could set that up as 603 miles. Let me get my pen again. 603 miles to 12.8 gallons of gas. Okay, and it says Manuel is planning a 1,260 mile vacation in his hybrid car. How many gallons of gas? So when you set up your proportion, always remember the same units go in the same location. So if miles is in the numerator and gallons is in the denominator, it is absolutely required over here for miles to be in the numerator and gallons to be in the denominator. Okay? And then go back and read what you have. It's planning a 1,260 mile vacation. So I have 1,260 miles, but I don't know how much gas, so I'm just going to call that in. And so once again, we can do our cross product by multiplying 603 times n. And on this side, I've got 12.8 or 12 and 8/10 times 1,260. And using my basic calculator, I got 12.8 times 1,260. And I get 16,128, and I still have 603n on this side. My next step will be divide both sides by 603. Remember, that's what we're doing every time, is divide both sides by the number in front of the n. Okay, so that's going to give me n is equal to, so 16,128 divided by 603. Again, I'm using a basic calculator. Now, I got a decimal. Okay, so I'm going to check my work. Is the decimal okay? Yeah. But maybe I typed in something wrong. So far, so good. Yes, so far, so good. Okay, now, it says Manuel needs approximately how many gallons of gas? This is round to the nearest whole number. Now, let me show you what I got in my calculator. I got 26.74626866. It goes on. But now the nearest whole number is this guy right here, right? Remember the rule is you look directly to the digit to the right. And if that digit is 5 or bigger, then this goes up to the next number, which would be a 7. If this number were below 5, then this would stay 26. So n is equal to 27 gallons is going to be our rounded answer. Okay, so problem number 25 didn't make it completely on the page. We're going to see if we can figure it out. So self-tanning lotion advertises that a 3-ounce bottle will provide 6 applications. Notice that's a ratio, right? So we have a 3-ounce bottle. So I'm going to say a 3-ounce bottle per 6 applications. By now you're kind of getting used to reading that, and that's one good reason for having so many of these problems. So 3-ounce problem, 6 applications. Now, I'm turning it into a proportion, but honest goodness, I haven't read the problem yet, so that equals might not go there. Jen found a great deal on a 13-ounce bottle of self-tanning lotion she had been using. Based on the advertising claims, how many applications of the self-tanner should Jen expect? Okay, so remember when you set up a proportion, this is a proportion, that you put the units in the same location. So when I set this one up, I better have ounces on top, okay, and applications on the bottom. So Jen has a 13-ounce bottle, and it's asking for how many applications. Okay, so we know what to do. We do our cross product, so 3 times n, and then our cross product this way, 6 times 13. All right, then remember the next step was to simplify the side opposite of the n, so basic calculator, 6 times 13. I should be able to do that in my head, but I just don't want to. 6 times 13 is equal to 78. And on the other side, remember this is 3n. What do I do next? You know what to do, right? You divide by 3 and divide by 3. Okay, so that's going to give me n on the left, and then I'm going to use my basic calculator and just divide it by 3, and that gives me 26. So the answer is going to be 26, and notice they already put applications for us. But if I were to write this on paper, I would have to put the units as well. That would be 26 applications. All right, next problem. What do we got here? Mosquitoes. Yes, they are annoying insects. To eliminate mosquito larvae, a certain granular substance can be applied to standing water in a ratio of 1 teaspoon per 15 square feet. There we go with our ratio. And it even told us, it announced this time it was a ratio. So 1 teaspoon, per means divide, 15 square feet. So you can write that like that, or you can write feet with a little 2 up there as an exponent. But I'm going to write it how they wrote it. Okay, now this is probably going to be a proportion problem. Now remember, if I set up a proportion, I need teaspoon on top and square feet in the denominator, just like it is in this ratio. So at this rate, find how many teaspoons. So we don't know the number of teaspoons, so I'm going to call that N. Of granules must be used with 180 square feet. How's that? All right, so this is going to answer part A. It did tell me what the part B question was. Good, and we could do that over here in just a minute. All right, so I cross product, right? So 1 times 180. And on the other side, I have 15 times N. Remember, you simplify the side opposite the N value. 1 times 180 is 180. Remember, what do we do next? You always divide by the number in front of your variable or your N value. So divide both sides by 15. Then I use my calculator and do 180 divided by 15, and I get 12. So that gives me 12 is equal to N. Now 12 what? Now remember, that was teaspoons. So this would be 12 teaspoons. Now look, they put it there for us, but really you should know. They shouldn't have to put it there for you. You should know what units you're dealing with. Okay, now part B. It says if 3 teaspoons is equal to 1 tablespoon, then how many tablespoons of granules must be used? Okay, so let's write that down. So 3 teaspoons, okay, is equal to, you could do it this way, 1 tablespoon. That really is a ratio. Okay, I did it differently on another conversion problem we had a minute ago when we changed minutes to seconds. But this works too. 3 teaspoons, 1 tablespoon. Okay, then how many tablespoons of granules must be used? Okay, so again, you still need here teaspoon on top and tablespoon on the bottom. And we have 12 teaspoons. And we're trying to figure out how many tablespoons. It's really just another proportion. So 3 times N equals to 1 times 12. You get 3N is equal to 12. What do? We divide both sides by the number in front of the N value. So divided by 3, and N is equal to 4. Now remember the N was tablespoons, so 4 tablespoons. How's that? So just 2 problems remaining. Another one really hard to read here because it almost slid off the screen. So a student would like to find a height of a statue. It says the length of the statue's right arm is 45 feet. The student's right arm is 2 feet long, and her height is 5 1/3 foot. So looks to me right here in the middle of a problem, we have a ratio. The student's arm is 2 feet long and her height is 5 1/3 feet. So 2 feet is the arm length over 5 1/3 feet is the height of the student. Okay, this is probably going to be a proportion, so here I go. And we've got to have the same thing, arm length and height over here. Notice they're both in feet, but they're measuring 2 different things, so I'm trying to make this real clear. So if we keep going, it says use the information to find the height of the statue. How close is the approximate height to the statue's actual height? Okay, so a student would like to find the height of the statue. The length of the statue's right arm is 45 feet. So we have a 45-foot arm here, and we don't know the height. So here we go. We're going to cross multiply again. So 2 times N is 2N. On the other side, we have 5 1/3 times 45. Now we know we don't like to deal with these mixed numbers, so we don't. We change that to an improper fraction. So remember, 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16, and you keep that over the original denominator of 3. And then that's going to be times 45. Let's write it as a fraction over 1. Do you see any common factors we can cancel? I do. So 45 and 3, they both divide by 3. Okay, so 3 divided by 3 is going to change to a 1. 45 divided by 3 is 15. So let's rewrite what we got. We still have a 2n on the left side. And we have 16 times 15. I'll use my calculator for that. 16 times 15 gives me 240 over 1 times 1 is 1. So you know what? When you have a 1 in the denominator, remember you don't need that. So I got rid of my fraction bar. Now what do? Remember, divide by the number times the n. So divide by 2, divide by 2, cancel the 2's. So I have n, and we know 240 divided by 2, if you need to use your calculator, is 120. 120 what? 120 feet. Now, it says, how close is the approximate height to the statue's actual height of 119 feet, 7 inches from heel to top? So it's really close. It's 5 inches off, right? So if we have 120 feet, that's 119 feet, 7 inches. So it's short by how much? Remember, 1 foot is equal to 12 inches. So if it only goes to 7 inches, okay, then I did 12 minus that 7 inches to give us 5 inches short. I'm not really sure how they answer that question. Maybe that answers the question they're going to ask, or maybe they just wanted the 120 feet. I'm not sure. Okay, we made it to the last question. So the gas-oil ratio for a certain chainsaw is 50 to 1. Now remember, it said the gas to oil ratio, so it's 50 in gas and 1 in oil. Okay, so that is a ratio. They even tell us that. Okay, probably going to be a proportion going on here. So I know if I set it up, it's got to be gas on top and oil on the bottom. So first question, how much oil in gallons, so we're missing oil, should be mixed with 6 gallons of gasoline? So 6 gallons of gasoline, oil is the one we don't know. Right, so we cross multiply or cross product. 50 times n is 50n. 1 times 6 is 6. Let's divide both sides by 50. Because that's what we've done every time, right? So the 50s cancel. Something's gone wrong with my tablet. Let me try that again. The 50s cancel. There we go. N is equal to. Now, 6 doesn't divide by 50, right? So I do want to reduce that. It says, it just wants this answer in gallons. So I assume, it just says simplify your answer, they want this in fraction form, but it's not very clear. It bothers me just a little bit. But this does reduce, it says simplify, so I'm assuming they want it in fraction form. These both divide by 2. There we go, divide by 2, divide by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3, 50 divided by 2 is 25. This is gallons, so 3/25 gallons of gas, so certainly not anywhere near a whole gallon. Now it says if 1 gallon is 128 fluid ounces, okay, then write the answer in part in a fluid ounce. So we could do this conversion like we did earlier. It says 128 ounces is equal to 1 gallon. Equals, okay, so we need ounces on top and gallons on the bottom. Now, we have 3/25 of a gallon, but we don't know how many ounces that is, and I made it an X. Let's make it an N and be consistent. All right, you know what we're going to do again. We're going to do our cross product. 128 times 3/25 is equal to, when I cross this way, 1 times N. Now, all 1 times N is just N, right? And over here, 128 and 25 don't have any common factors. So I'm just going to put this 128 over 1 and multiply straight across. 128 times 3, using my basic calculator, and I get 384. And then 1 times 25 is 25, is equal to N. And then and answer to part A in fluid ounces. Now, I'm not certain if they want this in a decimal or not. And again, without seeing part B, like how they want it rounded or they want it to the nearest ounce, I'm not sure. But let me just tell you what I got in my calculator. When I divided 384 by 25, I got 15.36. Remember, that's ounces, right? Because we were looking for ounces right here. Now, it might ask you to the nearest ounce, which would be 15 ounces. You're really going to have to read that, the directions on that one, because I'm not clear without all the full directions for part B. That wait, write the answer to part A in fluid ounces. Okay, but it's not a whole fluid ounce left over. So rounded, it's 15 ounces. Exact value is 15.36 ounces, or even 384/25ths of an ounce. Again, that's a directions issue. And forgive me for not pulling up the part B part of this problem before I printed this out. I hope you find this helpful. If you need a better breakdown on any of this information, always reach out and have a wonderful day.